Welcome back. Abnormal Psychology. Now we're looking at the theoretical perspectives, part 2. Now, many factors, including biological, psychological, social, and environmental, are involved in development of mood disorders. One element that's strongly related to depression is that of stress. Research indicates that there is a robust and causal association between stressful life events and major depressive episodes. Major depression is often preceded by stressful events, although not everyone who experiences such events will become depressed. Stressors such as a loss of a loved one, prolonged unemployment, physical illness, marital or relationship problems, economic hardships, pressures at work, racism, and discrimination may all contribute to the development and reoccurrence of mood disorders, especially major depression. It is also thought that depression will have an effect on personal stress levels or sources of stress. So this week we're going to not this week, but this part, we're going to look at the theoretical perspectives and how they view the sources of depression. And for the psychodynamic perspective, we're going to start with the classical psychodynamic theory. And in classic psychodynamic theory, depression is viewed in terms of inward directed anger. Most of us will process through, mourning rather normally, eventually separating ourselves from the loss, a death, a separation, a divorce. Pathological mourning is when people hold strongly ambivalent feelings, both strongly positive, love, and negative anger towards people they have lost, or whose loss is threatened, may direct unresolved anger towards the inward representation of these people. They have incorporated or introjected themselves into this whole situation. It produces a self-loathing and depression. Bipolar disorder is understood within psychodynamic theory in terms of shifting the balance between the ego and the superego. More recent psychodynamic models, such as the self-focusing model, incorporate both psychodynamic and cognitive aspects in explaining depression in terms of the continued pursuit of love-lost objects or goals that would be more adaptive and beneficial just to surrender them. But the continued pursuance is where they argue is part of the issue. Learning behavioral perspective, it focuses on situational factors in explaining depressions, such as changes in the level of reinforcement. When reinforcement is reduced, the person may feel unmotivated and depressed, which can lead to inactivity and further reduction in opportunities for reinforcement. Researcher Coynes, he produced an interactional theory focus on the negative family interactions that can lead to family members of depressed people to become less reinforcing to them. Cognitive perspective, the cognitive theorists relate the origin and maintenance of depression to the ways in which people see themselves and the world around them. Beck's cognitive theory focus on the role of negative or distorted thinking in depression was very impressive. Depression-prone people hold negative beliefs about themselves. The environment and the future also get included in that negative belief. This cognitive triad of depression leads to the specific errors in thinking, or what they will term cognitive distortions in response to negative events that in turn lead to depression. Now you're going to find a list of cognitive distortions in your text. Have a look. They're helpful. Martin Seligman, this is going back about 1975, he talked about learned helplessness model, and it's based on the belief that people may become depressed when they come to view themselves as helpless to control the reinforcement in the environment or to change their lives for the better. Now, what's interesting about this particular point, when I was in university, that's one of the experiments what we did was we taught people to be helpless. We used the research by Seligman and Hans Selye in the work to teach people to be helpless in a relatively short period of time. And we did this to demonstrate that learned helplessness is in fact and can be learned. So if it can be learned experimentally, it can be learned in one's life in a natural setting. A reformulated version of the theory held that the ways in which people explain events or their attributions determine their proneness towards depression in the face of negative events. The combination of internal, global, and stable attributions for negative events renders one of the most vulnerable to depression. Now, the biological perspective, genetics appear to play a role in mood disorders, especially in explaining major depressive disorders and bipolar disorders. Imbalances in the neurotransmitter activities in the brain appear to be involved in depression and mania. Now, in particular, norepinephrine and serotonin in depression. Twin and adoptive studies have added strength to this theory, the heredity factor. So in tying all this together, the diathys stress model, I said I'm going to be revisiting this frequently, and then here's another example. It's used as an explanatory framework to illustrate how biological or psychological diathys may interact with stress in the development of depression. Psychological and biological vulnerability lead to depression in the presence of potential stress factors such as unemployment, divorce, and pressing sociocultural factors. Potential protective factors such as coping resources and social support can protect from depression, while the lack of these protective factors can aggravate depression. All right. Well, there we are looking at, that was part 2 on the theoretical. In part 3, next I'll be doing treatments. All right, we'll see you in part 3, everyone. Bye now.